Explosions of light. Explosions of light. That is what I want in my life. Like Peter and James and John in the middle of my day, just like theirs, I want to suddenly see God. Blindingly bright. Unmistakably clear. To feel God's presence so powerful upon me in that moment that it feels like the sun on my skin. That's what I want. It's not, however, what I get. What I get is something a little bit more like diminutive dollops, fleeting, flickering flashes of God's light, God's very presence. Not necessarily even in the middle of my day, but off to the sides, on the periphery of my life. And when I turn towards them, when I reach out to them, hoping to hold them in my hand and in my heart, in my soul, the flash is gone. Just as quickly as it came, just as it was that first transfiguration moment. And so I understand Peter's response that day as described in Scripture, because like me and like you, I imagine, Peter wants that moment. He wants that light, that feeling of God's presence to last forever. Forever. Let me build you, he says to Jesus, and Moses and Elijah, a dwelling place. Peter hopes to live in that moment. And so do I. I'd offer to build those houses. I pitched in at Habitat for Humanity. I can help. It may not be a perfect house, but I would help. But alas, it is not meant to be. It is not meant to be. Not for us, not even for Peter and James and John. Such moments, they do not last forever in our lives. Peter looks back towards Moses and Elijah, and they're gone. Jesus and life return to normal. And whether we like it or not, God light travels through our lives, not slowly, not baskingly like the sun itself, but rather like a shooting star. And because of that, if we are to see these moments, to find them, be guided by them, we must look for them as we do shooting stars. To spot shooting stars, the first task is that we must believe. We must have the faith that although we might not yet see them, not in our present moment, not in all the darkness that surrounds us, they are there. They are there to be found. That we can and that we will see them if we are patient, if we continue to look. With shooting stars, as it is with God's very presence. The more anxiously we dart our eyes back and forth across the darkness which surrounds us, the more nervous we get that we can't now and that we fear we may never see anything. The more impatient we get, the more likely we are to give up, to stop looking, and never see. But if our hearts and eyes and spirits are still in the darkness, open and believing and faithful, if we soften our gaze and look with eyes wide open and waiting for the unexpected, with our hearts perched on the very precipice of expectation, shooting stars, God's light and presence, they do appear. They do appear, and often when they do, they appear out of the corner of our eyes. And they do so because in our eyes we have two types of cells, cones and rods, if you remember back from biology in the day. The cells in the very center of our eyes, they're cones. And they are perfectly made to see all the flashiness, the colors of life. The rod-type cells, on the other hand, that make up the outside edges of our retina, they only see black and white. They do not see color. Yet, they are perfectly made to see movement and to see light. That is why we often see better in the dark at the sides of our eyes rather than what is right in front of us. And that is how so often we can see and find God's presence, God's movement, God's light in our own lives. Not in what is right in front of us, but on the sides, that which is to the periphery of our lives, trying to enter into the middle. For example, we just had Christmas. It's fresh on our minds. But at Christmas, if we stare directly into all the bright lights of Christmas, the huge air-filled, neon-colored, vinyl Santas on the rooftops and the lawns, you've seen them. I saw some in Surfside. If we look at all the glitzy-colored holiday ads, the must-not-miss sales, then it's hard to see Christmas. The real Christmas. God's presence, God's movement. And yet, even then, even there, God's Spirit, God's love, God's healing, God's light, it is present. On the periphery of all that, less bright maybe, but still unmistakable, and able to be seen by those whose hearts are patient, whose hearts are perched on the edge of expectation, those that are like shooting star veterans, who know that God's presence and light are indeed there to find, still transfiguring hearts and minds and spirits today, even now, even in our jaded and troubled world. God's light shines. It shines still as it shone that first Transfiguration day. It shines whenever people weary with life and all of its hardships find welcome and they find rest in another's care. God's light shines whenever people who live in fear under the threat of harm find a listening, find peace, find encouragement, find justice. It shines whenever those who feel both the pull of their own heart and the giant expectations of the world, when they find guidance and direction in friendly conversations or another's experience. These are modern day, ordinary, yet spectacular transfiguration moments. And they shine, radiant, like a shooting star. And although we can't stay in those moments forever, and we cannot, these are precious moments. They can carry us like stepping stones of light along the path of faith when our path turns dark or unclear. To demonstrate just how that works, in the pews around you, even up there in the choir loft, there are little books. Little books, handcrafted, hand-cut. So God bless Shariana and her family for helping with that. So there's these little books. It's a flip book. I don't know if you've ever seen a flip book. But the way it works, let me demonstrate. You hold it on one side, and then you flick it like that. You thumb through it, and it's a little bit like a movie. Each page has a little something different on it. It starts off, you may notice, with the flash of a light of a star. But then, in that moment, that page, that light, it's gone. It's gone. But then another page, another moment comes, and it goes. Just as quick as it came. Just like it was that first Transfiguration day. The light, the image on each page never appears exactly where it was before. It's always different. But if we continue to look, if we have the faith to follow its flickering, its appearing and disappearing without getting disheartened. If we continue to turn the pages, it leads us into and reveals God's story. How God has and is still moving in our lives and our world. If we desire to stop on page 3, just like Peter wanted, and sometimes I want, if we want to keep in that moment, that particular light on that particular page in that moment, then we miss the rest of the story. We miss the rest of the message that God doesn't expect us to build a house for God, but is building a home in us, in our heart. If we stop on page 3 of the book, we miss the message of the shepherds and the angels which come into play later on. And so as we leave here today, may this flip book, you can share them with one another. I do believe we have enough for one family each. May it be a reminder for you to keep vigilant, to remain patient, to keep turning the page on that moment and waiting expectantly for the next. To be open to God entering from the margins, just as the images do in this book, and they move towards the center of the book, and God's presence moves into the center of our lives. Each act is humble that shines God's light, yet they are profoundly radiant. These unnoticeable, humble moments, they sustain us. They inspire us as we wait for the next flash of God light in our darkness. These are what make our dark nights holy. These are what make our days blessed. It is what guides us by wonder of a shooting star, guiding us always towards greater blessing and peace. Amen.